the general who shared his wife with 9 officers, Virginia 1863. In May 1863, amidst the smoke of the battles in Virginia, Southern General Silas Montgomery made a decision that defied military laws and the morality of the American aristocracy. He sealed a secret pact that allowed 9 of his trusted officers to have intimate encounters with his own wife, the refined Clara Montgomery. What began as a strategic plan to maintain the loyalty of his commanders and ensure the protection of his lineage in times of war, ended up dismantling one of the most respected names of the Confederacy. You are watching the channel Cabana do Tio Tomás, where we reveal the most disturbing and hidden stories from historical archives. If this account impacts you, leave your like to strengthen our channel. We spend hours researching narratives that textbooks prefer to forget. Share this video with those who enjoy history without filters. Comment below. Where are you watching from? We want to know how far our stories are reaching. And leave your opinion. What would you do if your family's survival depended on a moral sacrifice as extreme as this? The year was 1863. The American Civil War was reaching its boiling point. In Virginia, tobacco plantations served as the backdrop for a scene of death and desolation. The Oak Ridge Mansion, owned by the Montgomerys, still maintained its grandeur, but the fear of an invasion by Union troops loomed over the fields. General Silas Montgomery, at 58, was a decorated veteran, but he felt the weight of age and the absence of a direct successor who could inherit his command and his lands. Married to Clara for 12 years, he embittered the pain of not having children, while the war threatened to take everything he had built. Clara Montgomery, only 30 years old, was the personification of Southern elegance. The daughter of diplomats and educated in the finest parlors of Richmond, she was Silas's trophy. However, Clara's beauty hid a deep sadness for the gestational losses she had suffered. There were 3 attempts, all ending in mourning. For Silas, the continuity of his name was an obsession that surpassed marital love. He believed that the weakness of the Montgomery lineage required external intervention, a vigor that he, in his advanced age, might no longer be able to provide. It was on a cold night at camp that the seed of institutional betrayal was planted. Silas received a report from a military doctor about the genetic vigor necessary to form leaders. The general, already weakened by the pressure of the battlefront and the phantom of his family's extinction, began to see his subordinates not just as soldiers, but as donors of a strength he lacked. He selected 9 officers, men of impeccable health and aristocratic lineage, for a mission that involved neither gunpowder nor swords. The proposal was made in an absolute manner. Silas summoned the officers individually to his command tent. He offered promotions, land, and the guarantee that if they died in combat, their families would be cared for by the Montgomery fortune. In exchange, they were to protect and provide for Clara. In the rigid mentality of the time, a wife was seen as an extension of the husband's property, and Silas felt he had the right to dispose of her to save his legacy. Clara, isolated in the mansion, was informed of the decision not as a consultation, but as a patriotic and familial duty. The logistics of the agreement were meticulous. The general established that each officer would visit Clara on specific days, under the pretext of delivering confidential correspondence or war reports. The Oak Ridge Mansion became a stage for scheduled encounters. Clara, forced by the patriarchal structure and Silas's emotional manipulation, who claimed that only this way would the family avoid falling into misery if he were killed, submitted to the plan. The chosen officers included Captain Julian Vane, a young Maryland knight known for his strength, and Major Thomas Reed, a strategist with European features. Each encounter was watched from afar by Silas's eyes, as he spent the nights smoking in his office, counting the minutes on his gold watch. For Clara, the process was a constant dehumanization. She developed defense mechanisms, remaining in absolute silence during the encounters, treating the officers as ghosts necessary for her social survival. Pause for a moment. Think about the complexity of this situation. Men of military honor accepting an agreement that subverted the very concept of chivalry of the time to obtain future advantages. If you find this story revolting, leave your like. It is through these shadows of the past that we understand how power and obsession can corrupt human relationships. The war was not just on the battlefield, it was destroying the soul of that house in Virginia. In September 1863, Clara confirmed she was pregnant. The news brought a somber joy to General Silas. He would finally have his heir, but the secret was now a powder keg. Among the officers, the mood changed. Silent competition for paternity began to generate tension in the military command. Julian Vane began to show possessive jealousy, often riding to the mansion outside his shift to watch over Clara, which nearly resulted in a duel with Major Reed. Clara's pregnancy was marked by total isolation. She refused to leave her room, fearing that the eyes of the plantation slaves or neighbors would notice the changes in her body before the socially acceptable time. The family doctor, Dr. Sterling, was bribed with a small fortune to validate Silas's paternity before society. Meanwhile, the tension among the 9 officers was becoming unsustainable. The general, realizing he had created a militia of potential traitors, began sending the officers most attached to Clara to the most dangerous missions on the front lines. Fate, however, was relentless. In January 1864, before the child was even born, one of the officers deserted and delivered a letter detailing the agreement to a Richmond newspaper, driven by resentment for not being the chosen one for the final encounter before the pregnancy announcement. The scandal exploded like a grenade. General Silas Montgomery's honor was shattered, and the Southern elite, even in the midst of war, did not forgive the transgression. Clara found herself at the center of a storm of humiliation, while the son she carried became the symbol of a dynasty built upon the sacrifice of her own dignity. The leaking of the letter by the deserting officer sealed the fate of the Montgomery family. In a few weeks, General Silas's name, once a synonym for bravery, became a subject of whispers and scorn in the barracks and parlors of Virginia. The pressure was so great that the Confederate High Command, fearing the scandal would demoralize the already exhausted troops, stripped Silas of his post. He was sent back to Oak Ridge in a kind of house arrest disguised as medical leave. The man who had sacrificed his wife's honor for lineage now saw his own career buried before the heir was even born. Meanwhile, Clara's mental health deteriorated. She was no longer the mistress of the mansion, but a prisoner of her husband's plan. The 9 officers, now scattered across battlefronts or hidden by shame, became traumatic memories. Julian Vane, the captain who had shown the greatest obsession with her, died in combat in February 1864, taking with him the secret of his own hopes of paternity. Clara's isolation was absolute. Even the housemaids, who noticed the strange movement of the previous months, avoided her gaze. The atmosphere at Oak Ridge was like a wake held in advance. Silas, consumed by guilt and paranoia, began to drink heavily. He searched Clara's correspondence and forbade any visitors. The general feared that if the child were born with physical traits very different from his own, Dr. Sterling's medical farce would not hold up. The irony was cruel. He had planned every detail to save his dynasty, but now he trembled at the possibility that the success of his plan would become his final proof of moral treason. In April 1864, under the distant sound of Union cannons advancing through Virginia, Clara went into labor. The birth was difficult and prolonged. Silas waited in the hallway, not with the anxiety of a father, but with the dread of a conspirator. When the child's cry finally echoed, there was no celebration. The baby, a robust boy, was born with enviable health, exactly what Silas had sought, but his eyes and features vaguely resembled Major Thomas Reed, one of the officers of the pact. The general, upon seeing the child, felt a mixture of relief and revulsion. He had the heir, but he did not have peace. Clara, for her part, upon holding her son in her arms, made a drastic decision. She realized that child would never be free within that farce. That same night, taking advantage of Silas's drunken state and the confusion caused by the proximity of enemy troops, Clara fled the mansion with the newborn, aided by a former slave who knew the escape routes to the north. Clara Montgomery's flight was the final blow. Silas, upon waking to find the empty cradle and his missing wife, understood that he had lost everything. The agreement that was supposed to guarantee his future had destroyed his present. A few months later, with the final fall of Virginia and the invasion of Oak Ridge by Union troops, General Silas Montgomery was found dead in his office. He had left a written confession, asking for Clara's forgiveness, but history had already taken its course. Years later, reports emerged of a woman in Massachusetts who kept a detailed diary of the horrors of the Southern aristocracy during the war. It is believed it was Clara, living under a false name, raising her son far from the shadows of Virginia. The boy, who never knew which of the 9 officers was his true father, grew up as a free man, unaware that his existence was the result of one of the darkest pacts in American military history. This account shows us how, in times of despair and war, the line between duty and depravity becomes dangerously thin. If you have made it this far, it is because you value historical truth, no matter how painful it may be. The channel Cabana do Tio Tomás thanks you for your audience. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next unpublished documents. What did you think of General Silas's end? Did he get what he deserved, or was he just another victim of the obsession for power? Leave your final comment and share this video. Your interaction is what keeps this channel alive. Until the next narrative.